Fantastic. Good morning, everyone. I am David Levesque from Solar Austin, and welcome to our webinar called Austin's Carbon-Free Electricity Options. Regarding housekeeping that Matt mentioned, our objective today is to inform and inspire you to take action between now and May 21st, and we'll explain why that date is important. This is a complex topic, so let's have an ongoing discussion so we can help everyone understand. I've been thinking about where we can have that ongoing discussion. If anybody has ideas like Facebook or Reddit or Slack or preferences, then it'd be great to hear those ideas and we can talk about it more. Please put all your questions in the Zoom chat, and hopefully we'll have time for all your questions at the end. And this webinar is being recorded and distributed. So the topics today are: why are we here? A zero emissions simulator that myself and some colleagues put together. Some battery options that Jonathan's going to present. What is a GETS? Geothermal, and what can we do now? So this is the 2035 Austin Energy Resource Generation Plan. It requires Austin Energy to focus on 100% carbon-free by 2035. And then if you read into the plan, it has the languaging that says carbon-free as a percentage of load. So my question is, what does that mean? So in this video, you'll hear Lisa Martin from Austin Energy describing what that means.
I wanted you to take a moment to help us understand what you mean by carbon-free as 100% of our load, if I'm getting the phrasing correct.
So carbon-free, right? 100% carbon-free as a percentage of load essentially creates the assurance that we are covering our customers' energy needs with 100% carbon-free generation.
Does that mean we have no carbon generating resources?
No.
Yes, it intends to mean that in 2035.
What does intends to mean that? Like, we all know that this is a goal that we're setting that we want to get to, and we may undershoot a little or whatever, but what does intends to mean that?
Right, and you just hit on why I was pausing. So carbon-free is carbon-free, right? It means that there's no carbon, right? And our goal is to do that by 2035. The reason the percentage of load language is in there is simply to, again, assure that we are covering our entire customers' needs with that carbon-free energy, as opposed to having less than that and just all of that we have is carbon-free, and then relying on the ERCOT market, which we know is not cleaner. So yes, it's a supply and demand side of the equation.
Okay, thank you.
Could you all hear that okay? Shake your head, yes, yes. Yeah, okay, cool. So that was back in 2024, Lisa Martin, the Chief Operations Officer, explaining what she means by carbon-free as percentage load. Now, last night at the Electric Utility Council meeting, the Utility Council approved Austin Energy to talk to City Council about buying 400 megawatts of natural gas peakers. And that's interesting. I'll just play this one other video for you real quick so you can understand again, why are we here and having this conversation today.
What do you need in order to meet the goal of being in position for action and being in the peaker queue? What needs to happen in that regard?
We're finding that new peakers have a very long lead time. Some quoted the earliest availability in 2029. Other manufacturers aren't even accepting orders until 2030. All manufacturers are requiring milestone payments of 10 to 20% upfront, which equates anywhere between $5 to $15 million.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to see us be in a position to give them the authority that they need to be able to do what needs to be done, so that we can stay within our plan.
So as you can see, Mayor Watson favors gas peaker plants, and he feels that they're part of the plan, which is interesting given that the plan says carbon-free by 2035. but then we have this caveat as a percentage of load. So it's just an interesting dynamic for us to all be aware of. To be clear, the carbon-free supply has gone down over the last few years by 12%. It used to be 75 or 77%, and now it's only 65%. And don't get me wrong, Austin Energy has a huge, complex, difficult job. And the job is basically to balance supply and demand. So on the left side of this balance beam, you see all the ways that they can use to balance supply. And on the right-hand side, you see things that they can do to manage demand. And some of these require us to participate. And in fact, the things that require us to participate are the things that are the most economical and also the best for the cleanest air that we can have. So that's important to know as we think about our options as a city. And Austin Energy does have a plan for 275 megawatts of demand response by 2035, and also 405 megawatts of local solar by 2035. So that's also important to know that those already are on the roadmap of things that Austin Energy is planning to do. The question I had, and I've been working with a few folks on for a few months, is like, okay, this is what we're planning to do for demand response and local solar. Will that get us to zero emissions by 2035? And so we've been working on a little modeling tool, which I talked about in the promo material, which is like a zero emissions modeling tool. In other words, what is it going to take to get there? And so across the top, you'll see the 4 metrics that Austin Energy often mentions as the key things they're designing all their decisions around. So that is the cost of electricity, the amount of carbon-free, the peak hours of reserve margin, and what they call the reliability risk hours. This is highly complex. I'll try to simplify it for you in a few minutes. I designed this along with Al Billington and Chris, who's here on the call, and Corey. And the goal is not for you to understand everything, but just so you can play around with the levers and see how things affect other things, and also just know the basic vocabulary of which Austin Energy often speaks. And so I'm just going to click these 2 buttons here to simplify these graphs. So the main thing that Austin Energy says is we need peakers. And what do you need peakers for? You need peakers for this gap where there's more demand than there is supply. So this red gap right here is showing there's more demand than supply. If I highlight this, you can see there's what we call risk hours, right? So if we increase the peaker demand, it fills the risk hours. Can everybody see that okay? So that's one option. We can increase peakers, which is what Austin Energy is intending to do. Other things we could do is we could increase import capacity. If we just imported more electricity, that could also fill the gap. If we increase energy efficiency, that could also lower our demand and therefore make the gap smaller. If we increase our demand response, as they're planning to do, you can see how that shifts the load. Hopefully you're all watching right here on this graph. My point is that it's a complex matrix of things and they all interact with each other. And I want to give you this tool so you can play with it and understand it a little bit. And also, there's lots of opinions about what everything costs. And so down here, you can put in a cost that you think is the right cost. And we'll hear from Jonathan a little bit later about what the actual cost of batteries is in ERCOT and around the country. Another cool feature is that I'll just show you 2 other things and then move on. We can click this button and the software solves for what is the best possible mix to get us to 100% carbon free with 14% reserve margin and no risk hours. So this would be the ultimate mix if we could get there. As far as I can tell, Austin Energy doesn't really have a plan to get here. But I just wanted to show you that that's a feature of the tool. And if you want to dive even deeper, you could actually see all the different resources by resource and how they contribute to a zero emissions plan. So if you have questions about that, put it in the chat now while you're thinking about it. I'm going to share this link in the chat so you can all check it out. Again, the goal is that we have a conversation around this. This is not meant to replace multi-million-dollar software that they all use to do this modeling. It's meant to just have a conversation around the main talking points. So I'm going to go back to my slides here. And the next topic is Jonathan Scharf will talk to us about batteries. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, Jonathan, so you can speak.
Thank you. So yeah, nice to meet everyone. I am going to share my screen if that's okay. I just need to get request access.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't do that before. You got it.
Okay, cool. So apologies. I just got back from traveling for the last 2 weeks, and I'm also heading to Germany this Sunday. So didn't have too much time to spend on this, but let me go to the beginning of this slide. Okay. So, yep, this is on behalf of my company, Skyterra Group. I'll provide some information of who we are at the very end, but just think of us as an expert network in project delivery. So, my background, I actually have a PhD in developing batteries. It was technically in nanoengineering, but then I worked at Tesla and then at Accenture. I've worked on a lot of battery projects since then. So essentially to take a look at the market for LDES and energy storage as a whole, these are I guess the main points, right? So we have about 14 gigawatts operational, and we surpassed CAISO in Q2 of 2025. We have a bunch of different merchant IPPs who own it. The dominance is 1 to 2 hours. And LDES is real. And so I just came back from a conference in Nashville. It's called RZinc, and it focuses on zinc batteries. And there are two main markets for zinc batteries, depending on the chemistry. One is long duration energy storage, and the other is UPS because they have a higher discharge rate than traditional lithium ion. So those are the two areas that everyone at the conference was talking about. So with the ERCOT's structural advantages, and you all might know this, but single state ISO, so it's not bound by the same FERC interconnection rules or it's not as um, it, it's not as bad as other states. Um, there's a, the interconnection queue is a huge problem, but in terms of getting access, it's not as much of an issue. Um, Volatility is the asset. So basically, since we are our own beast, we can use batteries to tame that beast. And we have real-time co-optimization that we can provide. Um,
Then, do you mind before we leave that screen for a second? Can we just define a few of these things for folks who aren't used to it? So CAISO is the California version of ERCOT, right? IPP is independent power producer, so that's a company that makes electricity, right? LDS is long duration storage. So I just want to, yeah,
Please, yeah. And sometimes I get ahead of myself with these acronyms.
totally.
Um, But basically, and maybe I'll give a little indication of what each of these are. So energy arbitrage, right? So these are the three revenue buckets for energy. So energy arbitrage is basically like stocks. You sell when it's high, you buy when it's low. Sell energy when it's high, buy energy when it's low. And so because you have batteries that can discharge and charge, take and pull energy, push and pull energy, you can do that. And so that's basically base power that's here in Austin. Their whole model is essentially we're going to make money, give a bunch of people essentially free batteries and make money off of that arbitrage. Ancillary services, those are like the smoothing out services, right? So you have a lot of fluctuations. Data centers are interested in this, like battery backup units, so BBUs are for data centers. So this is the smooth the delivery so that it's not as irregular, and you have more confidence in the output of your generation. Um, and scarcity pricing. So we'll we'll hit on that in a little bit, but um, essentially what I want to talk about is most Texas batteries are 1 to 2 hours. So this is a SkyTerra estimate, but essentially, we're looking at about like most of it being an hour or two, some of them being 4 hours, and some of them going beyond 6+ hours. There's a company called TerraFlow here doing stuff in Austin. That's a zinc-based flow battery company. They're targeting the long duration energy storage, so the 6 hour plus here in Austin. But still the majority is 1 to 2 hours. When we look at the data center wave, and I'm sure a lot of people on here have different feelings about it, but it is rewriting the price curve and how things are getting pulled in by batteries. So, one scaler's campus is basically a third of Austin's peak load, right? Gigawatt plus. Um, and so when we think of the amount of, what's in the interconnection queue, right? We're talking about like hundreds of gigawatts. And this is referenced quite a bit, but Senate Bill 6, which defines large loads as 75 megawatt plus, it's effective at the start of the year. So basically, that mandates that now data centers with these larger loads need to actually have some sort of backup microgrid, essentially part of it. And so this is necessitating batteries. It's also kind of necessitating a little bit of that LDES, because even if you have natural gas, which is great, it's hard to have that running constantly. There's wear and tear on those generators. You need to constantly have an inflow of that natural gas. Or if it's, I mean, you shouldn't use diesel. I think diesel's pretty much out. But whatever type of generator it is, it's not great to keep it running. There's maintenance schedules, there's downtime that's scheduled. And so you're going to have a level of redundancy in order, which is a capital cost. So when I say redundancy, you're going to have usually n plus one. So, 3 generators is needed. You use 4 generators, and now you have to spend maybe even more because you need a constant supply of that energy. And so you have to think about the investment costs there. And so it's really important as they think long term of these data centers, how are they going to make it more cost effective and more reliable? And so LDES, long duration energy storage, that's the possibility. So when we look at, um, it's not just the utilities, it's the merchants, the co-location. So that's sort of what we're talking about here is basically creating these solar plus battery plus natural gas generators, microgrid assemblies with data centers, which with other types of build outs, and you get a really distribution of where that investment goes into, right? So there might be the tax equity, the construction debt, the working capital, and then the sponsor equity. And so there are the pure play storage IPPs. So these are the ones that are just doing like just storage, right? But then there are the integrated renewables and storage, like NextEra, Leeward, Apex. And then there's the co-located, right, which is the data center, which is sort of what you're seeing a lot of movement into. And then there's the utility owned. So like CPS Energy, Austin Energy, these are the ones that Austin Energy is actually putting out. Oh, I should note that no, that's important. Um, so co-location does flip the merchant risk to the contracted cash flow. So hyperscalers, they want this clean power on site. They don't necessarily want dirty. There's just not a lot of options for them. So they are trying to like sell behind the meter to single credit worthy off-takers. Um, the merchants then benefit in contract overnight, and then that lowers the cost of the capital by a bit. And so we do have a quite a bit of a pipeline of energy, or sorry, of generation. So DFW is looking at 2.3 gigawatts. Waco is looking at 2 gigawatts. Um, Austin 0.55 and San Antonio 3.35. Um, the LDES is real, but it's very early. And I have a pricing, I think it's the next slide, a pricing breakdown of each. Um, Iron Air is moving quite quickly. So there's been a lot of, so this is Form Energy. It's like basically the only one doing this. That being said, there was a China competitor that just announced itself basically doing the same thing. So they probably stole the technology. EOS is doing a lot as well. And Zinc 5, met with them. back in Nashville. So they're more UPS and data centers, so not long duration. NZync is, and there's a Urban Power Electric also in that area. Thermal, so Rondo and Tora, so those are actually not batteries, but they're thermal energy storage technologies. And so that's also uh, being explored as a path forward. Um, so when you think about zinc air, so this was actually taken from one of the conference. These are some of the insights from the National Conference of Zinc 5, just because it's fresh. So they're looking at $25 per kilowatt hour, which is uh, not not the best in my opinion. Um, they are looking at the data center market. They are looking to expand their cycle life so that's a lot cheaper per cycle. And so you'll see in the next slide, I actually normalize the cost per cycle because if they can't actually, when you think about the levelized cost of electricity, so um, the LCO, that is how much energy what the cost is for the energy that a asset produces over its lifetime. So when you think about a battery, it's basically the lifetime is how much it cycles. Assuming that if you its shelf life, which is if you leave it alone, it doesn't just die on its own. Um, So this is the cost breakdown. So if we look at like LFP, right? So this is dollars per kilowatt cycle. So basically, if you were to look at the cycling of the battery, um, so you can imagine if it's like 1,000 cycles multiplied by 1,000. Um, but essentially, you can look at it as the breakdown of each. LFP is the uh, most expensive. And so for this long duration energy storage, I don't see it really reducing, especially because we're really in this optimization stage. We've, I think, gotten a lot of the biggest wins in terms of decreasing costs. Um, and I do think Iron Air is looking to be a really good contender because it has a very long duration, so approximately like hundreds of hours. Um, and I think in terms of like cycling though, zinc and zinc manganese oxide is a strong contender. So though it looks like iron air is going to be cheaper. So that explains why these bigger companies are starting to invest in building out the Form Energy's power plants because it's just 6x cheaper than the LFP. So as we look on, we look at the RTC plus B revenue impact in summer auctions. That's like heading into quarter three. We start to see some of the Senate Bill 6 um, results essentially being implemented. So we're past it, being talked about in every single conversation, and now, okay, what does that actually mean for building it out? As I mentioned, Form Energy is actually moving forward with Centerpoint and Encore. Um, the first billion hyperscalers are actually the co-location is going along I-35. And then there's ongoing developments throughout all of these major sectors. So all these chemistries, I mean, there's the national labs are investing lots of money into figuring out which of these chemistries are going to win. And there also is a big geopolitical conversation of how we're going to beat China to developing these technologies since they pretty much own the lithium ion battery market. None of the national labs are investing in that area. So um, I probably inundated everyone here with way too much information. So I apologize. Hopefully you found it useful and informative. But that's pretty much it. Last thing I'll say is who is Skyterra Group? We're an expert network for energy project delivery. So we connect domain specialists, investors, EPCs, developers, and software tech. Um, our main goal is to help people get connected to develop the projects reliably. You can think of us as Yelp meets McKinsey. So we have a bunch of apps that we provide for free to anyone who joins the network. The network is free to join. We just require you to be good, and we actually kick people out if you don't meet the stuff. So essentially, our value is getting projects. It's not you joining the network. There's no fee for you joining. It's how can we sell you guys to get cool projects? How can we make the best connections? If you're not good, when you should really shouldn't be part of our group because we want the best. What we do is we have folks who are on the ground who record and take in all the information. What ChatGPT has access to is online information. What we provide is what's available in the world, right? And so this is actually a screenshot from our app of our database basically mapped out of all the relationships and all the sources that go into the different areas. And it's a little grayed out, but you can see we actually have views of our data kind of mapped out for utilities and hydrogen energy and the battery industry and whatnot. If you join, you get access to data centers, investors, developers, EPCs, so all the folks that we have access to through our collective networks. This slide got messed up in Gamma, but basically these are our partners, or some of our partners, and feel free to reach out to us. So yeah,
Thank you, Jonathan. Let's do one question on the batteries since we're top of mind right now, and then we'll go back to some of the other topics. So somebody in the chat asked, would a sodium change the battery longevity?
yeah. So sodium's a big one, and I probably should have put that on here as well. So sodium is actually pretty expensive. That's why it's not a big contender for LDES right now. A friend of mine is CEO of a sodium battery company in the US. A lot of them are tackling lead acid replacements, so like car batteries, because they're actually more expensive, but they're safer. So it's basically a safety argument. The reason they're more expensive, and by the way, safer in quotations, they have a wider temperature window. They're not going to blow up. Actually, if you take sodium metal and you bring it outside, it'll instantly light on fire. And but uh, the the idea is that it has a wider temperature regime. It can handle higher currents, so it's inherently more safe than, let's say, lead acid. Uh, it can get to be cost effective at a certain point. It just is not manufactured like mature in its manufacturing process. I toured a site manufacturing zinc. I mean, it's the zinc battery is actually the longest battery chemistry out there, like the oldest in history. I think the first was in Egypt. Um, I mean, Form's been around for a long time that really developed. CATL is developing it at high throughput. So I think the unfortunate thing is if anyone gets the cost low enough to be deployed for LDES, it would be China, not the US at this point.
Cool. Thank you for that. Can you see my screen again?
Um, I I'm sharing my screen as well, so let me.
Sure. Can somebody else
Yeah,
confirm? Okay,
oh,
cool.
I still see Jonathan's. Yeah.
I need to.
How about now?
Grid enhancing technologies.
Okay, thanks, Scott. So Zoe, are you here? Do you want to chat about that? If not, I'll go over these two slides we have on grid enhancing technologies. I've been emailing Zoe back and forth a little bit about it. I don't know if she's here or not. I'll go ahead and start. So this is an area that I just am learning about, and I haven't heard Austin Energy speak about in the last couple of years I've been following. So I wanted to bring it to everybody's attention. There's two particular things I wanted to bring to our attention. Number one is the ability for software to increase grid capacity, meaning how can we get more out of the grid we already have without buying a lot or maybe even any new hardware. And so that's the promise of grid enhancing technologies. You can see here there are several companies using different techniques, and you can see different percentage increased capacity. Imagine if we could get 20% or even 50% out of the hardware that we already have. That would be quite incredible. For example, Austin Energy is talking about increasing our load by 50%. If we could handle all that 50% just by software and not hardware, that would be pretty interesting. And so the next slide, I want to show how this is playing out in the rest of the country. And maybe we can have a chat about how we could help it play out here in Austin. Jonathan mentioned FERC. FERC is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. They actually passed an order called Order 1920 that requires utilities to use software such as grid enhancing technologies as a alternative to building new lines, as you can see here, right? And so if they haven't evaluated it and they're not planning to use it, they have to explain why they are not using it. Now, as Jonathan mentioned, Texas is kind of separate from the rest of the grid in the United States. And so we treat ourselves in a unique way. And so we didn't just follow this, we passed our own law. And that law is called 1699, or the number for it is 1699. And what the goal of this is to require the Public Utility Commission, that's the PUC of Texas, to establish goals for reducing load using software. So there is guidance, oversight, structure around using software to increase our grid capacity across the country and also in Texas. What I'd like to see, and something we can ask for as we go to City Council in the next few weeks, is how is Austin Energy using or not using these techniques? So I want to mention that real quick. And then another option for carbon-free options includes geothermal. Now, Austin Energy does have a contract for 9.9 megawatts of geothermal. And there are other companies, mostly based in Texas, who are commercializing geothermal for electricity. You'll hear quite a bit about geothermal for heat. We're specifically talking about geothermal for electricity. You can see the companies here on the left-hand side: XGS, Sage, Exceed, Rototherm, Evor. These are the closed-loop geothermal companies. I specifically highlighted those because I'm personally concerned about putting chemicals into the ground and also potential earthquakes caused by fracking. So closed-loop companies don't do either of those things. They have a closed loop, and so they don't put chemicals into the ground and they don't frack. So I'm mentioning this to say, in the back of our minds, we should be considering that these technologies are now, or very soon, will be able to create a lot of that base load clean power that we are potentially buying back gas peaker plants to try to produce. Now, a peaker is not base load, it's just for that hot August afternoon. So the advantage of investing in geothermal over, let's say, a peaker is the geothermal is for all the time. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So as we kind of wrap up the presentation portion and get into the question and answer portion of our webinar today, I just wanted to let you all know that when we did pass the generation plan that we looked at the beginning of the call today, Jose Velasquez required Austin Energy to do an RFP for clean energy alternatives, which they did do. And they are implementing a few of those, namely 2 battery projects. And we just heard about batteries from Jonathan. Councilmember Ryan Alter also added an amendment saying that Austin has to do a new feasibility study before asking for money for peaker plants. Based on my experience in going to the meetings over the last several weeks about this, I don't feel like they've actually done a good job at feasibility studies. So that's something we can talk about as a group. And also Councilmember Allison Alter required the prioritization of air quality and compliance with the 2035 carbon-free goal. Now, we heard at the beginning that the 2035 carbon-free goal seems a little bit malleable and unclear, and that's one of the things I'd also like to get clear about as a community in the next few weeks as we speak to City Council about this topic. So here are some dates and things that you can do. You can email your City Council or call them today. We have provided, and I'll put it in the chat, this simple form that if you fill out your name and email over here, it'll send an email to all the City Council members letting them know that you're concerned about more polluting gas peakers. And if you want to read through that and edit it, you can. Or if you just want to use the sample form that we provided for you, you can do that also. So I'll put that link in the chat. And the next city council meeting, which is called the Austin Energy Oversight Committee meeting, that's May 19th at 10 a.m. We can all go to City Hall or virtually participate in that meeting by signing up to speak. So if you'd like to do that, that's an option. And then on May 21st is when the actual discussion and vote will take place. So these are some important dates coming up soon in this discussion. And then another thing that's happening soon is our friend Sean will be hosting also on the 21st another discussion. This one happens to be in person about distributed energy resources, which is the DERs and demand side solutions. So a lot of the things that we spoke about today, if you want to learn more about that, Sean is hosting an event on the 21st in person at the East End Ballroom. So with that, I'll wrap up this portion and kind of open it up for questions and thoughts from the community. Thank you for being here. We appreciate you. Yes, go ahead, Scott.
I have a comment for discussion.
Yeah.
Like all of us on this call, we're all very interested in carbon-free solutions to a smooth and operating grid for Austin Energy. Austin Energy's is tasked with providing reliable, cost-effective, clean energy, right, in that order. So first, absolutely everyone is going to freak out if the energy's not reliable, right? We know from Winter Storm Uri. And so that's their first filter that they're looking at this through. And if we think about the solutions they have deployed, that Austin Energy has deployed in the past, they have owned power plants. Most of their renewable energy they've done through power purchase agreements. So right now they're proposing peaker plants here, which is obviously something that they know how to own and operate. And so that's going to fill in the gaps in a way that they know how to operate. So we know how to, and we have this long lead time, 5 years plus. Okay, so I can see how they're delivering on their promise for reliable first, and then they're working on the cost and the cleanliness after that. And peakers are not on all the time, so that's kind of nice. At least they're not emitting carbon 100% of the time, just to fill the gaps. So if I kind of, from Jonathan's presentation, we have a lot of coming options on long duration storage. So it's all wonderful news, but, and all these companies are working in this area. But if I think of Austin Energy's filter, is like our carbon-free request feels a little bit like either asking them to do something they really are not experts in, which is owning either wind, solar, or storage. They're not big on owning that stuff. They should be, because that's the future, but they tend to outsource and PPA that kind of technology. Or we're asking them to wait, like, hey, it's all coming. Don't contract for your peakers, because we have wonderful long duration energy storage systems coming. They're not going to be very comfortable with that solution. That's sort of like a hope kind of solution. And what they're trying to get into, what they're requesting is something that works and delivers on what they need, which is to fill those gaps. So I'm a little concerned about our request today. I mean, we're not supposed to have the answer to their problem about you should contract with this company or something. But our request today is don't take action on filling the hole that you can see coming, and keep researching about the coming cost-effective duration that is already in the market a little bit and is certainly coming to more in the market. So I feel like our request is a little, I'm not feeling the clarity of how to say, hey, powerfully, this is what you guys should do. You should not contract for that equipment, because you should be, looking at options. So there's sort of the problem as I see it as we go into these next couple of weeks.
So yeah, okay. I was trying to figure out how I'm doing to do the raised hand. regarding peakers are typically for like high power, and LDES, like TerraFlow is claiming higher power, which is quite interesting, but most LDES that is not great for high power. And so the existing options are pretty okay, but I think it's going to be a mixture of traditional batteries and LDS because the peaker plants can do longer outputs of that energy at higher power, right? Which makes them so interesting. Um, I think you're absolutely right in that, part of why I exist is to try to connect the folks like at Arzenk who are doing these newer technologies that are robust and great, and they may have deployments out in California or wherever they're at and connect them to the Austin Energies of the world who are a little bit like ignorant on what exists and how robust those options are. And so I think that's something that really needs to be ironed in. I do think there's a little bit of, I think I'm among good company here, of political incentives away from those options. And so I think it needs to be more of I think there needs to be more collaboration in bringing out the options that are less polluting. Um, so that's my take on from a battery and tech perspective.
Excellent. Thank you, Jonathan. Do other people have thoughts, questions, concerns, ideas? Yeah, Anna, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree directionally with some of the things that Scott's saying. For folks who don't know me, my name's Anna Scott. I live here in Austin. I'm on the Joint Sustainability Commission, amongst other things, being a concerned citizen. And I do think it's important in the discussions with any energy company to be able to say, hey, like, here's the solution we're advocating for. One thing I've seen other utilities do that I'm not really clear if Austin Energy has done is have an internal modeling survey. I don't exactly have like the language right on this. I'm sure people can tell me what the right term of art is here. But to ask internally from Austin Energy's point of view, like, what is our pathway to 100% renewable energy? This is like, I saw this posted. This was a job posting from Excel Energy. I saw pop up on LinkedIn. I got like, I don't know, my buddy's ex-girlfriend did this for a living. Like, I know that this exists, mostly socially. But like that, if and I've had some conversations with them as well. Like, this is what I would advocate for as my solution is like, I can tell you, I think it should be, XYZ, but they're going to have to get there on their own. Has there been any conversation about mandating or in this case, funding that type of work? And David, I saw you nodding. So like, maybe you can correct me on the words I'm using here. You can tell I'm not an electricity person specifically.
Yeah, I haven't studied the org chart at Austin Energy extremely, but Scott and Matt and I and many others have been going to the meetings for years, and it seems to me they do not have like a chief innovation officer or somebody who's in charge of like the clean energy strategy. And I would agree that one of our requests over the next few weeks can be something like, "Hey, City Council member, please ask Austin Energy to show us one plan that would get us to zero emissions by 2035." And we have this document that's called a plan, but it's not actually a plan. It doesn't say we're going to buy this, we're going to buy that, we're going to do this. So I think that's what you're getting at, Anna. It's like Lisa and Vanessa. Sorry, I don't know why Siri thinks I'm talking to her. I'm not talking to you. So is that what you're saying? Is like it would be nice if they had a role / title / consultant or something?
I don't even know if it needs to be a role. It just appears to me in the conversations I've had that they haven't truly asked the right question of like how we could get there, right? Like, I think they're trying to ask the question of like, hey, how do we fill, the demand needs? But the question I want to know as somebody who's responsible for helping Austin implement its clean energy goals is what would it take to get us there? And what do they view as those specific gaps, right? Because if the question is like price, right? Like, I just don't see that work has been done, but I also haven't looked very hard. And so I don't want to like throw accusations out. I don't know if it needs to be a full-time person. I mean, a small muni probably doesn't have that type of person, but presumably, we do these type of modeling studies.
From
Right.
Austin Energy, they have their biannual gen plan, their generation plan, and that's their forward facing document on what is their. It's a 10-year plan made every 2 years.
Right. Yeah. So I think there needs to be, I mean, I'll find this Excel posting and figure out like, whatever they're doing, but it's asking the different question and doing that actual modeling work, of which I am not an energy systems modeler, but there are such people here.
Awesome. Thanks, Anna. Go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to agree with all said here to a certain degree, and there's a lot of interesting areas to cover. I'm sorry, turning off my. Oh, it's not going to let me turn off the hand that way. Uh, sorry for the distraction here. Uh, uh, Last night's meeting I thought was pretty good in that they did reveal some numbers that I hadn't heard in terms of specificity of intent. And essentially, the engineering problem to be solved has not been well defined in my mind. The modeling exists, but they can't share it for, confidentiality reasons. I always hate that when I hear that. But, they're kind of talking about 400 megawatts of capacity, and they essentially see a financial hedge need for 425 hours in this high demand growth regimen that we're in. And so that helps set some boundary conditions. And then they keep pointing to a recent event where Austin Energy was in near jeopardy in terms of performance, and that was reflected in congestion pricing and load separation within Austin Energy's area. And that was an 8-hour duration event. So essentially, what they're telling you is we need 400 megawatts of capacity and we need 10 hours of it. And so that's the hole to be filled. And lithium-ion batteries can't fill a 4,000 megawatt hour hole as a general rule, because it's not guaranteed that you're going to have a recharge opportunity the next day. Because that's really so it's a relatively big hole, and they're just saying proven technology. In 4 years we could have a couple hundred megawatts of gas peaker capacity. Okay, that's the story. And they're finally getting around to kind of being specific about the risk scenario that's being described. Um, the biggest problem to me is that we've kind of blown up the gas market literally in Iran, and we do not know what pricing is going to look like this summer, much less what it's going to look like in 2 or 3 years. So in my mind, the apparent risk of all technology alternatives has improved a lot. But then that just takes us back to Jonathan's, some of the point that have been made about us being specific about what we think is a viable alternative. Because I agree with Scott. That's why I wanted to emphasize what Scott's point is that I agree with them. Austin Energy can't say we hope for alternative. An alternative. They've already taken on risk with the geothermal activity, where it's a new geothermal well and they're combining it with CO2 technology. So that's combining two risks. That's pretty bold. That's why it's a small project. And then if you look at the biomass plant, that was not perceived as a success, and that was used internally by many people to beat up Roger Duncan and all the other parties that were party of that. So we have arguably the environment has punished risk takers at Austin Energy, which is unfortunate. So I think it's part of our job is to try and create an environment that is willing to embrace risk and also talk about cost. Because Austin Energy right now perceives themselves to be not cash rich and not meeting the goals. So they're having to, in a rise inflationary environment, they're having to talk about raising rates to keep up with that inflationary environment. So I'm very sympathetic to Austin Energy's demands. I do wish they were more ambitious, given that there's so much support for them in the public to be ambitious. But that does mean that we have to, if they make a really good effort, we need to come to their defense in the face of a failure event. Yeah. Presuming that they make a good faith effort to do all those things.
Thank you, Matt. We appreciate all the context and expertise you have brought to the table for many years.
Okay.
Does somebody else have some thoughts or comments?
Yes, I was going to chime in. Hi, everybody. I'm Sangiti Said. And hi, Jonathan. And hi, David. Thanks for the good update. I think, being in the sort of low emissions, carbon free space, and I work for Cummins Inc. On the engineering side. The comments I was going to make is I liked how I think Scott and few others have mentioned. To me, I think there is a lot of opportunity, but the key would be keeping the three sort of performance indicators: reliability, cost, and sort of the availability, or how readily the technology can be available. I think it's, time will tell, but I personally, being an engineering field, it's a great time for good faith effort to be made, and for Austin Energy to adopt. I think they have to look at the viability and how soon the technology can be integrated in the available systems they've got. So the players who are able to provide that, keeping the trade-offs in mind, I think have got a really good runway. But I haven't seen all the reports from Austin Energy, how they're evaluating, but I thought this discussion was really good. Being an Austinite for 4.5 years, I think it's a good opportunity space to play in. So I just wanted to share some thoughts there. Given the limited time, don't want to go into hard engineering for carbon-free solutions.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and paste in the chat the document that Austin Energy shared last night at the Electric Utility Commission meeting. It's pretty beefy and gives you a lot of the context of the points that we're making. And will be the document that they use to present to City Council in a few weeks. And then kind of your comment, Sangati, is relevant to someone else's comment in the chat. Like, how do we present these new technologies to Austin Energy? And that's something I'm particularly interested in. Maybe in the last few minutes we can brainstorm on a bit. The process as it is now is, and Scott or Matt helped me out, like once a year or once every couple of years they put out an RFP, and pretty much that's kind of the process. It'd be great, I think, if we could iterate on that and have a better process. I don't know, Scott, do you know anything different about how they?
My impression of the RFPs is that they come about whenever they feel pressured by by council to issue some RFPs. I've always been a little bit puzzled that they don't just have a standing rolling RFP for new generation. Given that we are in a growth environment, we know it needs to be in the load zone. I don't understand why there's just not a standing RFP for a capacity and a cost target. It's like, if you can bring something that, is viable at this capacity and this cost target, then we want to talk to you. So I don't understand why there's not a rolling RFP like that, but I've not been able to pin anybody down and ask that question. Just, yeah.
So Austin does have a sustainability department, which I think they renamed now to something else, but I'm just thinking about who in the city might be willing to or able to kind of continually remind City Council to ask that of Austin Energy. Certainly we can ask that, and that's kind of the one thing that we can do as public. As the public, we can go to these city council meetings and make these requests, right? And then the next step is actually have a one-on-one with the city council member themselves or their staff, and also suggest these kind of things. Specifically, Ryan Alter, Mike Siegel, and a few others are very open to those kinds of meetings, and they want to hear our feedback on these things. So, I would like, I was also brainstorming, and tell me what you think of this, like, maybe it'd be fun to have a weekend where we all just get together and we think about options that could exist, and we like put a map together. It's not really our job, I think, to your point, Anna, it's not our job to like do the vetting for them. At the same time, it seems like, as Matt pointed out, Austin Energy has taken risk in the past and had those, let's say, backfire or not turn out well. And so maybe that's why they're less prone to evaluating lots of options right now.
I mean, maybe just a clarifying comment, David, is just, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And so is it our job? Maybe, maybe not. I think it's certainly an opportunity. I think what I was trying to say more is that like they will have to feel ownership of that solution. And again, having worked a little bit in this space, just I think the dynamics are such that like I don't think the generation plans are going to come from the sustainability folks. Just typically in an organization, an energy organization, like you don't end up in sustainability because you're like the most powerful, influential person in the org. And I'm so sorry if anyone like talk me down if people feel like this isn't true, but as someone who has worked in sustainability, like normally like we're fighting for a space and fighting for a voice. And that's amazing if that's not the case here. And so that's why I'm saying like, you know, what is it that's going to drive the decisions in this space? It's going to be having a solid generation plan that they agree on and they believe in. And so, you know, certainly we can and should advocate for our own like really technically defensible solution. I think that would be helpful. And ultimately, it will have to be something that they feel ownership in. So, like when, you know, I'm like going toe to toe with Lisa Martin or whatever, it's not, hey, like I think that supplier like should have responded X to the, you know, whatever. Like they have to be able to say, hey, you know, this is where we feel like we can get to. And this is what we think the blockers like. They have to own that. They have to really feel that.
Well, I'll comment on. I agree with what you're saying, and yeah, it has to come from Option Energy. It's got to be something that they support. As an example, they recently said, "Oh, well, we're interested in a hydrogen capable turbine system." Now we all are like, "Oh yeah, but it's going to be fossil fuel powered to start and potentially forever." So no, it's a hard no. But when engaging with people, it's like, where's that coming from? Why is that interest there? In part is because some of their members thought that that would be an avenue for them to develop a foothold as a supplier of hydrogen to long haul transportation. Now, I don't know if I agree with that, but that was what they were thinking. It's like, oh, if we have that plant, that will help drive hydrogen infrastructure into the Austin central region, and then hydrogen as a transportation fuel would be more viable. So that's an interesting discussion that never came outside of Austin Energy. That motivational component, I never heard that in the public domain, unfortunately, because to me that's a great topic. It's just like, yes, we want to, because that's the big nut in the Austin area for being a carbon-free city, right? It's transportation. How are we going to help break the transportation nut? Now, personally, I think the electricity and batteries, even in long haul, is probably what's going to work over the long haul. But that's, I've never looked at it. I don't know the details in it. So, where was I taking that? I was just agreeing with you. It needs to come from Austin Energy. There are people who are throwing that out in my recent discussions with David. I think it's an interesting point that there isn't a point person for innovation, and we're not putting, the 10-year plan is an ambition, really, that we don't take it very far in terms of details, or we don't discuss what we're willing to wait for, because it's a very difficult environment right now, because it's rapid innovation, rapid demand growth. Everything's rapid. And so you want to wait, but there's also danger in waiting, because you can't, hope is not a design strategy. It's not a build strategy.
Cool. Thank you, Matt. I do want to say thank you to everybody. We can stay on and chat longer. I recognize that we're here now at 1 o'clock. So if you need to drop off, we appreciate you being here. I hope that you have access to the links that we shared. If you want to do this more, please let me know when you see me in person around town, or send me an email, and we can still stay on and chat more if you all like. I just want to say thank you everyone for being here for now. So
David, can I ask a question for anyone who wants to stay on?
Yeah, just 1 second, Scott. I hear you, Anna, that it needs to come internally and be their idea. I also hear that oftentimes it comes from city council asking them to do it. So
both, right? Like
yeah.
right? I have a feeling, if city council comes and people have been involved in the space way longer than me, but like I suspect if someone on this phone call comes up with a plan of their own, their response would then be to go on and do some type of their own plan as well.
Right.
I don't know, Matt can tell me whether or not that tracks, but I think a both is maybe what I'm advocating for.
Got it.
Everything all at once.
Okay, so let's hear from Scott, and then it sounds like David Hogan wants to share. Go ahead, Scott.
I just was thinking of a sort of counter argument that they might bring up to know, against taking this action of stopping the order, is that if we put in an order, there's a 5-year lead time, and it's $5 million, is a $5 million deposit, 10% upfront. Does that actually become a saleable asset, the $5 million deposit, that, like, as time goes on, in year 4, it's only 1 year till delivery. If we choose to buy a battery instead, we can sell the $5 million deposit for $6 million.
That's something I was thinking about. Yeah.
And so they might say, hey, look, well, all we're asking for today is that because of the lead time, we have to take action today. Give us the $5 million. We're actually have the ability to change our mind for a profit even at a later date.
I mean, Scott, it could also go the other way, right? Which is that 5 years from now, the battery costs come down. As everyone's saying, the AI stuff breaks.
In the electric equipment market is so tight that, that in the next 4 years, it's not, the lead times just keep, everyone's contracting out.
The lead times are high because these gas equipment manufacturers believed and have believed that the demand for their technology has been relatively static. So all of this is resting on how much you totally believe wholeheartedly in these large demand growth forecasts. And so in so much as we believe that we have that, then yeah, absolutely that holds. I'm just pointing out that, like, if that premise falls apart for a variety of reasons.
If they build a new factory and double capacity of turbines, then, but still you could argue that our deposit, we might make a profit. If we don't make a profit, we wouldn't lose too much, but we would lose the optionality of getting a delivery in 5 years.
I think what I would personally advocate for is, like, I suspect they're going to probably find a way to spend this money no matter what. My question is, why can't they spend commensurate amounts of money on the risk that battery technology gets as cheaper as we think it does, right? To me, we only allow ourselves to, like, envision this, like, future state in which we win for gas related technologies, and we don't do the flip side. So if what you're saying is absolutely true, then you also need to be making commensurate investments in these other types of future trends, right? So to me, it's strange that we say, no, our forecasts about the hyperscalers are absolutely spot on 100%, and we don't extend that same amount of, like, credence to forecasts about Chinese manufacturing cost. Historically, only one of these class of forecasts have been true. And it's not our forecasts about energy demand, which have been overblown in the past. Maybe they're underblown this time. I don't know. But I think if you're going to bet on, like, those future certainties and you want to talk about investments, like, you should be doing this for all of these different types. And
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead, David. You wanted to share?
Yeah. I would like to make the point that I don't believe the city council, I don't believe Austin Energy has made a good faith effort to respond to the 2035 plan that Austin City Council approved. And that includes the mayor, he was mayor back then, still the mayor. They haven't made the good faith effort to even develop a plan, at least not that they're exposing to us. Maybe it exists, but I think they owe us at least expose the trade-offs and why they came down the side of gas peakers are necessary. So I would press the effort that they haven't fulfilled their obligation. And the city council, through the general manager of AE, works for the general manager who sits on the city council, or at least he's a non-voting member, but he's there. The city council could require the general manager to direct the Austin Energy GM to be more responsive. They have not been responsive as of yet.
Thank you. And I would also say, for everybody's education who's not following it as closely, when the general plan passed, it was like, I don't know, was it January or something of 2025? And then they sent out this RFP, all resources RFP, to include clean options as well as fossil-based options. And when they sent it out was like right before Thanksgiving or in early December. It was one of those two dates, and then it was due in mid-January. And so when we talk about good faith efforts, I think anybody who's been in business for any amount of time knows that that's just not a good time to be doing business. There's not a lot of business that gets done during Thanksgiving and Christmas. And so I would point to that as like not a good faith effort. And so I think Matt's solution to that is, yeah, let's just have an open RFP all the time. We know we're going to need hundreds of megawatts, and we know we're retiring hundreds of megawatts. And so that could be something we could request. Someone in the chat has mentioned something about capturing CO2. I'm not sure who that is, DL26. Do you want to come on and chat about what you're speaking about? Capturing a ton of premium carbon per hour? If not, that's okay.
Sorry. Yeah, that might be me. I didn't realize. I thought my name might be on there. My bad.
Okay. Hi, what's your name?
Can you hear me?
Yes, what's your name?
Yeah, my name's Petey. I'm here in Austin with Local. Yeah, so we've developed a pyrolysis platform, converts end-of-life materials, arbor waste, rubber tires, converts it into syngas, captured carbon known as biochar or carbon black, and a couple different types of liquids. We were awarded a circular economy prize from the city of Boston a couple years back, and then they just kind of forgot about us. I've been trying to identify the right parties to go through, whether it be the sustainability office, the circular economy office, Austin Energy, Austin Water. It's just all so complicated. Even though I was born and raised in the city, I don't even know who to speak with anymore.
Hi, Petey. Good to hear from you. Yeah, it's an interesting question. Matt or Scott, do you have ideas? Does your technology generate electricity, or you're just capturing carbon? I missed that part.
Yeah, so the synthesis gas we produce will generate more than 2 megawatts of electricity. We have a parasitic load on our technology, so it powers itself with its own generated electricity. But that can either go back into the grid, used for electrical vehicles, go into a battery bank, kind of the best economic model available.
Right. And what are the output emissions of it?
It's a traditional natural gas generator. So right now we work with a Generac 150 kilowatt generator that burns our fuel cleanly, and it's passing all of the current Texas air regulations. We went through the environmental, what is it, TCEQ already with everything.
What's the feedstock requirement?
Right now we're using pallet wood. Our main partner is the largest pallet recycling company in North America, but Austin Wood Recycling, with all the different arbor waste, Christmas tree waste, utility line waste, anything organic can be processed through our platform.
Yeah, I mean, my gut feeling is come to one of the UC meetings or the city council meetings, or go meet with your city council member and tell them about it.
Perfect. Love it. I will. Thank you, sir.
Also, if you read through this document that I put in the chat, that is Austin Energy's kind of metrics for why they're going in this direction, you'll see one line that talks about essentially technology readiness level, TRL. And so that's something that, as we've talked about a bunch on this call, the amount of risk that's perceived or real by trying something new is something that influences their decision. So, you know, having a pilot plant somewhere else or your pilot plant here is probably a precursor to them making any other.
Most definitely, yes. Yeah, we were fortunate to be awarded an Air Force AFWERX contract to develop this for the military as well as for the private sector. We're a capital factory, and we also are aware of the kind of boondoggle of that biomass facility out in Natchitoches that failed a couple years ago. So I know it's an uphill battle for us, but I will definitely spend more time trying to meet the proper. Is there like a website I should go speak with for identifying the right gatekeepers right now.
Yeah, let me put it in the chat. We do have a blog post on the Solar Austin website that has all the city council contact information. So what you want to do is look up the one that's represented from your district and speak to them.
Okay, perfect.
I wanted to give that to everybody anyway, so let me put that in the chat.
And I don't want to rag on the natural gas plant too much. I mean, it is still in the portfolio. It still is used, and still run when it's economic. It just, it was predicated on some market developments that did not transpire. And so had those market developments, and I'm talking about emission pricing, had emission pricing occurred, everybody would have looked at it as a wild success and been very happy with it. But, that's what happens.
Of course.
But
And
stacked
again,
risks
yeah.
is where you get burned when you start stacking risks.
And I love that feedback, sir. So yeah, I'm the original creator of this technology. I took it through UT Austin, the technology commercialization program, and that was the whole thing we were discovering is it wasn't just about the electricity, it wasn't about the emissions. Now we're able to quantify all these other co-products. So I would even love the opportunity to help bid on getting that project up and running with our new technology, because with the wood vinegar and the biocrude oils that we're producing, marine grain biocrude, we can make that thing operate 24 hours a day, get electricity back on the grid while we're making some circular manufacturing components. So as there's an opportunity for that discussion, that gets me very excited.
Yeah, you should, at worst case, you can show up at a EUC meeting and pigeonhole some of the Austin Energy senior management.
Perfect. All right. Look forward to it. Thank you guys for this time. Really, really do appreciate you.
Thank you. And I do have a events calendar. I'll put that in the chat too. It shows you when all those EUC meetings are and when the city council meetings are. And if anybody else has a climate related event they want us to put on our website, we can have it on that page. All right. Any other suggestions, questions? David Hogan?
A question for Jonathan, if he's still online. I understand there are some flow battery products that are currently available products, mature products being sold in a production fashion. Are these, I think Fluence is an example of one of these flow batteries. Are they too expensive or not long enough duration? Any comment on that?
So TerraFlow was one of the companies I mentioned. They are a flow battery that's doing some work here in Austin. It is a bit more mature, right? And folks are like EOS, great example, right? They're manufacturing, they're commercial. I think the problem is that they tend not to have the right even though companies like TerraFlow are claiming they have it, they tend not to have the same power density. So they can't provide the same energy per unit time that other assets can. The other thing is that it's just harder to conceptualize. This is I guess my opinion for why people haven't adopted them as much, is that it's easier to just say, hey, let's put a bunch of batteries or let's put natural gas because that's what we're used to. And so there's a slow adoption there. I think the other thing is it's usually not as cost effective. So if you actually look at because they're lower energy density, and so if you actually like do the kilowatt hour, dollars per kilowatt hour, it's not as good as a peaker. So it's or a natural gas. So that's why they don't go with it. So,
but it's pollution free.
Correct. And so that's where I think there are options that are cost competitive in flow batteries in particular. Um, the problem is getting into the door to say, hey, it actually won't be as challenging to implement this instead. Because I think it's not even just the cost, it's the risk. We know our suppliers, we know our vendors, we know how to do this with natural gas. Why would we take the risk up? So there's two is like, hey, it's going to be more cost effective if you do it this way. Let's convince you of that. The second is here's an incentive program that makes it too appealing to not do. And that's we're not aligned in that on the local level or on the federal level. Yeah.
Just I was searching in the background for flow batteries. The two largest established flow batteries are both in China, so they're not really an available supply chain. But they max out at 1,000 MWh, which is interesting. Those are the two, and 200 megawatts. Um, so arguably, the largest projects in the world can power 200 megawatts for 5 hours. And that doesn't really meet the problem statement as given by Austin Energy, which again, for the first time, they'd kind of put some hard numbers to it last night, 400 megawatt hours, and they keep pointing to this 10-hour event. So they're essentially saying, we want 4,000 hours of storage at a high capacity. And that is almost the definition of a natural gas peaker plant. I mean, it's an amazing battery, because you have a huge gather distribution network, and you're just leaving the gas in the ground where it's been stored by Mother Nature for however long. And it works great as long as, those gather lines aren't frozen, as they were in Uri. So as long as that is the hard definition, they're always going to be able to point to that in a cogent fashion. So I'm curious how we can assess that risk. How valuable is that? But I put three questions in the chat that I was kind of curious about, and the one that interests me most in this exact moment is on the demand response side, because there hasn't really been any talk within Austin Energy that I'm aware of to assess if we get into emergency conditions, how, are there people who can forfeit energy consumption that are part of that demand equation if we did something to ask them to forfeit demand? I would say that Austin Energy hasn't been as robust in the demand response arena as I'd like them to be, other than the thermostat program. They have not
Hey, Matt,
reached.
before we explore that a little bit more, do you
Yeah.
want to explain to people again about, well, not again, but for the first time, probably a lot of people haven't heard why we actually didn't have electricity during Uri and why a gas peaker plant will not solve that problem?
Oh, yeah. So keep in mind, yeah, the problem being solved is a financial risk problem to a certain degree. So David, there are two topics here. What happened in Uri? Arguably, Austin Energy was the best performing utility in Texas during Uri, but the citizens of Austin certainly did get punished. And that's because Austin Energy generated twice as much power during Uri as we were allowed to consume by ERCOT because it was emergency conditions. The primary goal was to support the grid at whatever capacity it could deliver at the time. Austin Energy delivered in spades in terms of generating power, but we had a mandate to reduce our energy consumption, which was greater than the granularity, the sectionalization of our grid management would allow us to rotate that outage gracefully. So I happen to live inside the city of Austin, but receive power from the Petronas Electric Co-op. That's this is the urban edge of what is a rural cooperative. And so I had power intermittently throughout Uri, and that was perfectly tolerable for me, for as long as it needed to be. Austin Energy couldn't do that because the cut that they were mandated to take was so deep that they had only critical circuits active, so they could not play musical chairs. So that's a problem that they're working on in parallel to this. I'm not satisfied to the insight and description of that, but it is an ongoing investment that's in parallel, is to improve sectionalization of the grid. Um, the problem that's being saved now is the growth in load price separation. And that's essentially an indicator that grid congestion is preventing power from getting into our load zone. And so we have a localized power production problem, which can be solved by increased transmission or increased in-load generation. Either of those work. Transmission's very hard. Generation is not easy, but it's completely controlled by Austin Energy. So, again, they're pursuing, both avenues, but the one they have complete control over is generation. And so, that's the one that's getting emphasis. But it also means that, that generator is in our load zone affecting our air quality. And so that's that it's legitimately a topic of concern and why we are all here. And so anyway, I was interested at poking at this problem from two avenues is, gee, we have some old generators. Getting new generators in the context of the existing portfolio is inherently good because the new generators will run more often than the old generators. So essentially doing the same thing will have fewer emissions. There's going to be a net benefit, but I don't know how big that benefit is based only on the emissions alone. So that's some math that I would like to see Austin Energy poke at, and I don't understand why they haven't pursued that part of the puzzle as a positive to be advertised by the project's pursuit. But then separately, as a completely distinct way to address the problem, is just to manage load. So if we hit emergency conditions, who has flexibility in their demand and could be paid or forced to withdraw to address this condition. So I don't have any insight into that demand management side of within the Austin Energy load zone. So I guess it was kind of a question if anybody else had any thoughts on the demand management.
Yeah, I can bring up a slide on that in a second, but go ahead, Ghana. You want to say something? I'm not sure I'm still pronouncing your name correctly. Something about the
Hey,
software.
David. Yeah, David. Yeah. So I just want to bring up the whole era of AI and the sentiment of using AI and all of this because I see a lot of opportunities. To your point, software can save 20 to 50%. It doesn't make sense to get a little deeper into those areas to find out what exactly those savings are, and then also bring in the whole idea of using AI into this. Just want to throw that out and see what the sentiment is in general in the group of using AI into any of these savings or even the predictions and all those. I see a ton of opportunities where we could absolutely implement AI, but I don't know if it's going to be really in terms of sustainability, but at least it's the savings aspect. It also looks like might help save the peaks situations and all that. But just wanted to see what's the sentiment in general towards AI. I was looking through the doc which you sent from the Austin, Energy, but there's zero references of AI. Also made me curious. Why not? I mean, the world is passing, moving so fast on the AI. Just wondering.
Well, when people are talking rapid demand growth, that's an indirect way to say AI because that is the new high spending source of demand that's making everybody else nervous simply because the current rules require utilities to serve. So, they have a requirement to serve demand. Doesn't matter where the demand comes from. But if
Right.
that demand has deep pockets, that demand can say, well, we really don't care what the price of electricity is. We're going to make money with it. And then that puts a lot of burden on everybody else that is not as ready to play in that aggressive market. If generation can't keep up with that demand. I know. As far as the benefits that AI are going to bring to grid management or any of those other parts, I don't have any insight into that. So until somebody walks me through a success story, yeah, I
Well, I
think.
think. Well, I think that's where my curiosity as well. Like, should we even do some sort of study in regards to what AI can do in those areas? to
Yeah.
even say, yes, this is what the real benefit you would see, just even from the math standpoint, instead of the real, world examples.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is, oh, go ahead. I'll let you go first.
One second. I can share with you the research that I've done so far, and if you want to look into it a little bit more, and I'd be grateful for it. I would say in general,
Sure.
there
Sure.
are many people who feel that AI in general is like the problem. I personally feel that we can use software, as I mentioned earlier, to help solve the problem. Yeah, it'd be great to team up on that and think about that some more. And the last comment I'll make is something like, I've personally been interacting with Boston Energy's software for the last 8 months doing these solar installations. And in general, my sense is that they do not have a, what's the right word? Up-to-date software system or culture, let's say.
I see.
And so I think this is something else that we can ask for, right? We can ask potentially city council to inquire about how do we get our utility
more
up to
access.
speed. And part of that is what I was trying to show in my presentation, that at the federal level, it's a requirement for all the utilities to do this, right? And also at the state Texas level, it's a requirement. So it's not just our idea of a group of concerned citizens, it's like a big issue, right? So I think there is some ability to move in that direction, I hope. Go ahead, somebody else raised their hand. Was it DL19?
Yeah, sorry, I thought the name showed up too. My name is Robert. I I would encourage you to not really look at a solution, at a technology, and see where that can be plugged in. Instead, look at solutions. I'm referring to the original question. It is. I mean, I work in a company. I'll stay anonymous, but it's an energy company, and we have a modeling team. And I have asked them, like, this is forecasting, this is looking at past data. Surely, this is something that you can plug into a large language model, and it will tell you. And that's just not how it works. So I do not doubt at all, David, that Austin Energy's software chops could use some sharpening. And indeed, like, I work on the in-house software team for my company, trying to make that better. So I think an investment in software, and especially in the kind of software for modeling or for management of like a distributed energy resource, would probably be really valuable. I think I would just look in terms of like, what, instead of asking how can AI help, it's what are the different tools available, regardless of being AI or not, that could serve Austin. So, for example, just better investment in even traditional software engineering and design would probably. I'll let David speak to that, but I imagine that would go a long way without needing to use an LLM.
Well, that's what the working backwards is basically. I mean, if you go ask for tools, obviously they might say why. Then, rather saying that, I was saying, let's just start with the strategy AI, then maybe work backwards and, get those all plugged in, to your point, so that we can have the right predictions and whatnot. But thanks, Robert.
You got it.
So, yeah, thanks, Robert. That's good, helpful insight. I would say that, and this is kind of why we titled this webinar this way, like, what are the clean electricity options? And software, I think, is one of them. And so, yeah, if we can work together to encourage city council, to encourage Austin Energy to get better at software, I think that would help us all, in my opinion. I do want to address Matt's comment about demand response. Maybe we can, as a first, and feel free, obviously, to drop off. Obviously, we're chatting right here if you want to. So I have a slide here on what Austin Energy is doing related to demand response, and in sharing the slide, I can also define that for y'all if you haven't heard of the concept. So demand response basically means that Austin Energy will pay you to turn down your load or your demand. And so in 2024, you can see over here on the left, they had 65,000 folks participate in their energy efficiency and demand response programs. Now, if we just break out the demand response portion of it, it's around 7,000. Can you see those two numbers there, Matt? if you're still here.
No, let me try to blow that up
That's so small, yeah.
locally.
So this is from their fiscal year 2024 annual report. And you can see between energy efficiency and demand response, they spent $20 million. Just demand response looks like around 1.5 million. So very low by comparison to energy efficiency. So to your point, there's probably a lot of room for improvement here. And one of the things
But
they have
I
done,
don't see any megawatt hour numbers. So does that mean, why is that? Those line items have dollar figures next to them, but then there's no megawatt hours. So that tells me that I don't know what that tells me.
yeah, it's an interesting conversation I've been having with myself and a few other people. Like capacity, as I can see it, is always measured in megawatts, not megawatt hours. And I think so here they're defining capacity as being just megawatts.
Well, I'm looking at column 2, which is energy savings in megawatt hours.
Right. And they have a
And
zero
it's,
for this. I get it.
and
But I
yeah,
think what they're trying to communicate is they've increased their capacity by some number of megawatts here in column 3
yeah.
without calling out megawatt hours specifically, right? Although everything else has megawatt hours. So it's
Oh,
just,
so maybe it was an exercise and they were paying some amount for availability
right.
and they just didn't utilize it for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, but that's good though, because that tells you, so again, currently that bucket is 7 megawatts
Yeah.
versus the 400 megawatts that they're claiming to need. So, uh, again, I don't know what I don't know what we think the potential is, how much
Right.
uh,
We get, yeah, totally.
yeah. So, okay, yeah, that's great.
One thing they have done in the last year is require all city buildings to participate in the demand response program. Before that, it was just basically voluntary. And so that is one way that they're really increasing the demand response. And this is 2024 numbers, right? So in 2025, when that report comes out, we can look at that and see what those numbers are. Any questions or thoughts about that, or shall we wrap up?
Yeah.
Thank,
I think this has been great.
thank you. Appreciate you all participating and being here. Hopefully we can continue the conversation and also attend these meetings that are coming up soon.
Thank you for organizing
Thank
it,
you.
David.
Yes, this was wonderful. Really appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a good day.